Today I'm going to show you how to change the outer tie rod on your car. You know that your tie rods are worn when you've got this much play in the sideways direction, but no play in the up and down direction. And you can see that the tire is worn out more along the outside here than the inside, and that can indicate that there's something wrong with the tie rod or the toe alignment. And if you look down here where the outer tie rod joins to the knuckle, you can see that there's so much play when I move the knuckle, so we're going to have to replace this outer tie rod. Now, I've also got a torn up boot that I need to replace as well. Now the outer tie rod is held in place by a 17mm castle nut over here and a 19mm jamb nut on the inner tie rod, so I'm just going to spray that down with some penetrating oil before I break it free. So I'm just going to come in with my 19mm wrench here and break this jamb nut free. Now down at the bottom here we have a castle nut which is supposed to have a cotter pin in it, so you have to next remove whatever's left of that cotter pin and then use a 17mm socket, and then I'm going to blast off the castle nut. Now I'm going to remove the boot clamps that hold the boot on. Now in and behind here we have the boot clamp that attaches the boot to the rack, so I'm going to use a screwdriver to remove that. So you can see this is the clamp here, I got it loose. Now I can pull the actual boot off of the steering rack itself, and I can pull the boot back away to reveal the inner tie rod. So just before I remove the outer tie rod, I need to take some measurements just to make sure that my alignment doesn't get thrown off. The first measurement I'm going to do is from the back plane of this nut here, because I know this nut is actually rusted to the inner tie rod, to the center of the tie rod over here. Now the second measurement I'm going to do is from the back plane of the inner tie rod where it mounts to the steering rack, again to the center of the tie rod, so I can match those dimensions up with my new tie rod to make sure my alignment is correct. So my first measurement is just about 1/16 short of 8 inches, and the second measurement I measured with the wheel straight so that we don't have any arcs in the system, and I've got just about 1/8 short of 16 inches here. So now I need to pop the tie rod free from the knuckle, so I'm just going to give it a whack here. So now I'm going to remove the outer tie rod from the knuckle, and I can begin to turn it off of the inner tie rod. Let's actually count the turns. So I'm just going to rotate it once, 21 turns, okay guys? This is the old part, it's probably the OE part, and I can definitely feel a lot of axial play when I move the ball joint in and out, and that's what's causing the wheel to move in and out with so much play. And this here is the new part that I'm using. It's from Mevotech. As you can see, it's exactly the same as the OE part. Even if you line up the backing plates here, you can see that at the end they actually line up and they are not any different in length, so that means you really don't have to go for an alignment as long as you don't touch anything else on the car. Now the ball joint here is nice and tight on the new one. You can see it comes with a much bigger castle nut, so you are going to have to change from a 17mm to a 19mm tool, and you've got your cotter pin. Now I've got my brother's old t-shirt here. I hope he doesn't see this, but I'm going to use it to remove this inner tie rod boot here because it is so greasy. Now's a really good time to check your inner tie rods if it needs to be replaced. You can just pull on it here and I can feel that there's no axial play, so this tie rod is in good shape and it's not really grinding or anything. The only thing I might want to do is add a little bit of grease around here because that boot was ripped. Now this here is the old boot. You can see how ripped up it is and all the grease has escaped. And this is the new boot here. It's much more durable. Now you can see that the OE hardware uses this clamp, which I'll probably reuse, and this clamp here, which is really difficult to get on, so they've supplied zip ties instead. So I'm just going to put a little bit of grease around the inner tie rod. In order to make it easier to break free next time, I'm just going to lubricate this threads of the inner tie rod with some anti-seize. And now I'm going to install the inner tie rod boot, and I'm going to coat the inside here so it slides around the jamb nut. I'm going to insert the boot over top, and now with the new boot on there, I'm just going to slip the zip tie around the steering rack where the boot meets it. And now I can slip on the boot clamp over the boot and release it. Now I'm going to install the outer tie rod onto the inner tie rod, and I'm going to count the turns when it catches to 21 turns. 21. And now with this is still a little bit loose, I'm going to insert it into the knuckle, push it down, and thread on the castle nut on the bottom here. And now I'm going to tighten the castle nut until it's nice and snug. Now I'm going to insert the cotter pin into the hole, and now with the cotter pin inserted, I'm just going to use my pliers and bend them off to the side. Now back up at the top here, I'm just going to come in with my 19mm wrench and tighten up this jamb nut here. And once everything is tightened down, I'm just going to double check the alignment, and I'm exactly 1/16 below 8 inches, so that's perfect. Alright, now I'm going to replace the wheel. Now with the wheel mounted, as I rotate the wheel from side to side, I can no longer feel that play that I used to feel with the old tie rod. So I know this is Nice and secure and safe. Now one easy way to check your wheel alignment is to tie a string between two random objects and position it parallel to the rear wheels. And then I'm going to grab my brother's old toothbrush and make sure that at the rear wheel here, the distance between this side here and on this side over here is exactly the same, so I know that this string is exactly parallel to the rear wheel. Now up at the front wheel, I'm going to use a tape measure and I'm going to measure the Tholian angle. So at the back here, I know I've got 25 millimeters offset between the string, and over here I've got about 26 millimeters or so, and that's perfect because you want the wheel to be slightly towed in so that the vehicle tracks straight down the road. Finally, we're going to take the vehicle for a test drive, and as you can see, the vehicle is tracking pretty straight.